Microphone check, 1, 2, what is this? It's the 5'7" assassin in the podcast business. I am your host, Rohan Patra, the rap music plug at your service.
Here we are again at the end of a rainbow.
The Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV is the remedy to the I don't have anything good to listen to problem. Through in-depth album and song reviews, as well as artist interviews and general rap commentary sprinkled in between on all of what the mainstream and underground rap scenes have to offer, this is your one-stop shop to knowing what to add to your queue, play next, or pop into your record player. Welcome to the show. What is up, family? Today, I am really excited to be joined by a esoteric, some would call abstract, somewhat spiritual even, philosophical, but all the while incredibly smooth rapper from Seattle who's delivered two of my absolute favorite albums of the year, the Televangel-produced collab album Metatron's Cube, and his even more recent project with Small Professor, 100 Year Darkness. So I'm very excited to welcome AJ Suede to the show. How you doing, man?
Peace, dude. That was a great intro. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Your year has been off the charts, and I'm really excited to get into those records and just how you approach the game, because I think it's pretty unique. But where I want to start is where you're from, because I know of some Seattle artists in the game that have like made a name for themselves, but it's definitely not like New York or some of the bigger cities as it relates to hip hop. So like, how is the hip hop culture in Seattle like?
All right. So originally, I am from New York. I'm from East Harlem,
Yeah.
and I lived there the majority of my life. I lived in Seattle for 5 years now, and Seattle's local scene. When I first came here visiting, like playing shows, like while I was traveling, you'll notice that Seattle has a super strong local tight-knit scene because Seattle's used to being skipped by a lot of tours. Like when you
Right.
look on a lot of tour flyers, there's a lot of times where it'll go straight from Portland to Vancouver, BC. And I think like out of necessity, Seattle's been able to have like a very self-sustained, tight-knit local scene. And a lot of it, obviously there's rap everywhere, but the early shows, a lot of the early shows that I was playing around town would be with a lot of bands, like a lot of punk bands, with some indie bands and like a couple rappers here and there. But it's a lot of the times it was a type of environment where all of those different types of musicians could play together. House shows, there was a very thriving house show scene to the point that like a house was throwing something every weekend. So when I first came out here and decided that I wanted to stay, I was in the midst of playing shows every single weekend and working part-time. So it was just it was dope. And then over time, I just felt like it was a very great place for me to continue making music as long as I go home as often as possible, which has kind of been tricky with the pandemic. But prior to that, I would still try to go back east as much as I could.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting. Yeah. So the punk scene's definitely, is that still very thriving in Seattle? Like
yeah,
the
I
grunge
definitely.
kind of
I
scene.
mean,
Yeah.
the thing about it though is like as the city changes, like most major cities, like gentrification and property values increasing, a lot of those houses that were around when I first got here aren't throwing shows anymore. Like they got noise ordinanced out or developer bought the property and leveled it. So, but there's still like a thriving scene of punk shows. And during the pandemic, there's like this bridge downtown, like under the bridge, there's huge shows, punk and metal and whatnot. And I got into it because one of my main producers and like best friends from Seattle, uh, he also DJs for me when I play live shows.
Oh, okay.
He's in two very well-known punk bands in the area, three actually. But so I got the chance to go to a lot of these shows and just see a lot of the type of music that I would hear about when I was living on the East Coast, like the shit that I would hear in skate vids. And there was no thriving scene where I was living at. And while I was in New York also, I wasn't tapped in with anybody who was into stuff like that. So that aspect of being in this city was also pretty instrumental to the development of my style, I think.
And you also I think because of like maybe I'm curious, like the fact that you were playing a lot of shows with a lot of different like non-hip hop acts. Like one thing I noticed in like the references you make in your music, and to an extent the music, the actual like aesthetic of some of your beats and stuff, it's definitely pulling from not just hip hop. Like it seems like you have a pretty like
Yeah,
wide array of tastes, like some of the references you mentioned. So like what were some of the reasons, and like what are some like your the acts, like the non-hip hop influences that have like inspired you?
shit. I'm just like in order probably. I'm gonna think about like as I got into making beats and shit. But early on, I was hella into Massive Attack
Nice.
and like Portishead, Tricky, and like all the Bristol trip hop shit was pretty big. And then I started fucking with like Stereo Lab and anything that dropped on 4AD records too. So like fucking Atlas Sound and all that. Anything that was sounding really good to the ears at the time. But and then on the other side of that, there's tons of the shit with all the punk and metal stuff is that there's people who are like diehard fans of that, and that's all they listen to 24/7. So they'll know all of these bands that I never heard of, and that's the type of
Mm-hmm.
shit where you might go to shows and fools will be like, "Oh, you ever heard of this band? Or you heard of this band?" And a lot of the shit I like from that world is like 70s to 80s older punk that I've heard on like skate videos that might have sent me down that rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, and this is the reason why I gave that disclaimer because somebody who's like into that shit, like for real, is gonna think that me saying I fuck with Black Flag or even Misfits or Bad Brains, these are all very popular bands at this
Yeah.
point, but I love them all the same. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I definitely like, yeah, I would say I'm into those, but I'm no deep head when it comes to punk. Like I like Black Flag, I like Bad Brains, but I
yeah,
don't
there's also
know.
but I think the extent of that for me getting to learn more was going to see for a while. There was a lot of bands who were like local to Seattle
Mm.
that are also fire too, but sometimes you don't even get to catch the name. You just in the crowd.
That's cool though, man. That's like it's a lot more natural way to get like ingratiated to music, because I mean most people most of the time, like myself included, like I'm learning about music through the internet, which is great. Like the
Yeah,
internet has a lot of great things, but it's something special to just truly get introduced to someone live. Like that's
yeah, for
that's
sure. Especially like unbiased. You don't know the name, you don't know the people,
mm-hmm.
so if it's good and it catches you, you could just be like. There's tons of times I'll go out to hear live music for all genres, and every once in a while I have to stop and ask somebody and be like, "Yo, who's this?" And I'll pay attention from there. How it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But word.
And if we move to like influences that are inspirations specific to hip hop, there's actually
Mhm.
one name that I got heard that got tossed around by one of the patrons for the show, actually Noah. He mentioned that your style from like a delivery perspective reminds him, or like a vibe reminds him of Currency. Like you're like I think he said you're like a philosophical spiritual Currency. And I was
Yo,
like,
that's crazy.
that's not that far off, I guess.
Yo, but the thing about that though is like even to like go a little bit after earlier rap influences, there was a time where Damon Dash had this studio called DD 172. And that's where the first Pilot Talk album by Currency was dropped. But at that same exact time, Jay Electronica would be over there a lot, Smoke DZA,
Mm,
uh, Big Crit. And that was that era where they were kind of pioneering the blog era in
yeah.
a way. But at that time, when I was like in 11th grade and I first started really getting into Currency's music, I also heard Exhibit A by Jay Electronica and Exhibit C. And I think that was pretty detrimental without me really consciously thinking about it. I definitely feel like there's influence from Currency as far as like all the fly shit, the smoking, the lifestyle shit. But then
Hmm.
somebody who's kind of like Jay Elect, who has that philosophical type of aspect to them. So I would say that that's probably a fair cross because I am influenced by both of those worlds in one way or another.
Yeah, because like one of the things I really find interesting about your music is that like you have a lot of substance to what you're saying, and there's a lot of references that like even a lot of them I don't even really understand some of the concepts you're discussing. But at the same time, it doesn't, I don't think, require to like if you don't understand everything, it just becomes immediately unlistenable. Like because your flow, the vibe, it does feel kind of like lifestyle rap. where you could put this on, and I know I would be very confident most people that like hip hop will be like, oh, this is sick. Like, there's not like it's not as abrasive as I think a lot of even like a J Electronica. Sometimes it can be just very in
Yeah,
your face to where like he's
sure.
saying like a bunch of stuff where you're like you kind of you're confronted with it a bit differently. So I find that
Yeah.
interesting with yours.
Yeah, you definitely like J Electronica can't be played in like every single mood. I feel like I gotta try to encompass all of those into something. So it's kind of like you're mixing food and medicine. Like I'll
Mm-hmm.
talk a whole bunch of shit and then might slide something else in there, make you think, and then go back to something else. So you're not thinking too hard. You know, maybe you'll think about it later.
Mm-hmm.
Especially it's cool also like when you have bars that go over heads. And then like I know with a lot of my favorite rappers, they might have had bars that like I've known the song well enough to recite them, but I still don't understand them
Yeah,
until
all the
maybe
time.
later in my life. And then I'm like, oh shit. And that sticks with you. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying?
Yeah. And if we go a bit into this kind of that bag that you have, like all the spiritual, philosophical perspective you bring in your music, um, what attracts you to like explore that even outside of hip hop? Like, what is it about all of that that you find so interesting? And then also, why do you like to actually include that in your raps?
Well, I think like in general, I like to learn, you know, and I think it's one thing when you search for topics to learn, you kind of can't force yourself to learn something that you don't care about. So every once in a while I might just be reading random stuff or like watching random things, falling down rabbit holes of knowledge and doing research. And the topics that keep me glued in, like the shit that's interesting enough for me to want to keep trying to learn about, by default it's going to find its way into the music. And a lot of the times it's not even like I'm thinking about it all year round. It just I might have happened to have been learning about a certain subject or a certain part of that at the same exact time that I was writing. So just naturally it found its way in there. But whenever you find something interesting like that, you I kind of just dive in and try to learn as much as possible until the point that until I get bored of it and try to learn something else. But I'm always just trying to learn something, even if it's not like just the textbook shit, but just
Mm-hmm.
accumulating knowledge, you know?
And like specifically with like abstract, like I think imagery and just some of the even the ways you approach songs, like it seems like that's you're clearly like intrigued by the more abstract slice of life. Like what is it like? Have you always been like that? Did you always grow up liking abstract art or more experimental ideas, I guess you could say? I don't know if that's the right way of saying it.
You know, potentially. I mean, because I probably didn't like really appreciate it at the time, but like in school as a kid, I went on tons of field trips to, you know, Metropolitan Museum of Art, Museum of Natural History. I was at a different museum damn near like every week. And my mom is also a teacher too, you know, like she doesn't really teach anymore, but at that time she was definitely she was a computer teacher. But we would go to museums all the time. I might go with her in her school. And I feel like without me really thinking about it, yeah, maybe for sure. You know, like I remember going to see certain and as a kid, a lot of that shit could be really boring to you. You know, like we might do
Yeah.
something in our school. Like I went to a school called Ella Baker, which is in like the Upper East Side of in Manhattan. And it was kind of what they call these days like a Montessori school. You ever heard that term?
No.
So it's kind of like a school, it's an elementary school. Like we called all our teachers by their first names,
Oh, I
you
think I
know?
do know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. And like whenever we had art class, it wasn't always like there was a unit. There was different stations and we kind of just had the room to do whatever the fuck we want, you know, and as with a lot of things. But like I was there up until like fifth grade. And I think and part of that we did go to tons of fucking museums and stuff like that. And I don't think that at the time I would have appreciated it, but I'm sure some of it stuck with me because I just have random knowledge of shit that I retain. You know, I remember going to go see Matisse and having a unit on cubism and shit like that in elementary school,
That is
you know?
that is wild.
And it's a public school too, you know, it's not
Yeah.
like it's not private or anything.
Hmm. That's a lot of like things that people don't even know about as adults. Like, that
Yeah,
is pretty
yeah, it's
wild.
crazy. Like I don't really. I was actually pretty fortunate because I think about a lot of the shit I learned. It was you know, we would do shit like that. You have a unit or something, and then we go and see it live.
Yeah, it
So
allows you to apply your knowledge. Like that always is usually a way people learn, especially
yeah,
young.
like you know, no point of knowledge if you can't apply it, right?
Yeah. So if we get into like specifically how you rap, like from like how you approach a song, like how do you do that? Is it usually that you hear a beat and that kind of like drives you're like, okay, I'm feeling this beat, it makes me want to rap about X? Or is it the opposite? Are you a guy that writes first and then picks beats to kind of like fit that
Yo,
mood?
I used to do that shit. I used to like write in silence sometimes and try to like puzzle piece it together. But I think like I think me personally, I think it's easier. I'll listen to a bunch of beats and like you said, I'll wait for the one beat that makes me want to write on the spot. And I think that that guides the way that I write because every beat kind of, you can see it when you swap beats out. Like let's say that you have something at a tempo and you write it to one beat and then you might swap a beat out to see how it's never, there's certain pockets that are always going to be missed. And
Yeah.
I think that as I try to keep progressing in my writing, I'll let the beats tell me where to hit certain bars. And I think a lot of really good examples of that on the Small Professor album because his beats and his drum styles aren't, there's swings to it. You know, a lot of times it swings, so it's kind of on me as like the vocalist. I think that I'm just another instrument in it. You know.
Yeah, I definitely hear that, especially on that Small Professor album. Like it, and especially just even contrasting that with the Metatron's Cube. Like those are not similar pockets. Like obviously there are
Yeah.
some similarities. You're the same rapper, but Small Professor is not making beats like Televangel and vice versa. Like that
Sure.
showed the versatility just like within 2 months span.
You know, but yeah, I mean, you also hear like the type of beats that, like like the difference in as producers, Televangel beats. There's a lot to them, you know. So the thing with that album, I felt was a little bit like there was a couple times where I really barred out, but I think from the perspective of the producer that I was working with, we were kind of trying to craft songs that had like bridges and had like
Mm-hmm.
progressions, and they kind of kept changing as the song went. Whereas the Small Professor album, to me, I felt like I was on some like jazz musician shit. Like we were like in a lounge and there's somebody with an upright bass, you know, but that's all small, and I'm kind of just like grooving with that.
No, I love that. I love that. I love that image you just put. It does feel like that because I was like, I definitely, we'll get into it a little later. Like there is a subtlety to that album and just kind of like a relax that is so infectious, but you're still like you're going hard lyrically.
I appreciate you, you know,
Yeah.
hearing that.
And as someone who first heard you, I believe like I feel like literally like 17 artists I've heard for the first time was on that Iceberg Theory, August Fanon, Dispatches from the Kali Yuga. I was called that the gateway drug of like a huge
Yo, that's a great album, and
great
he's a great
album,
artist. You know,
great artist.
I know he's doing his thing and he's taking a step back, but that's somebody that first album I heard from him was a August Fanon album as well, and there's multiple songs on there that I was like, yo, who is this?
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you're on, I think, track 3 on that album. And the immediate takeaway I had from that feature was just that I was like, damn, like this person feels, because obviously I didn't know who you were at the time. I was like, this person feels very sure of themselves. Like they have a style that feels very refined and like worked on. It didn't seem like you were an amateur, which obviously you weren't. So, and the particular things that really caught my eye were like the delivery and like the ways that it almost immediately just off one song, I felt like you had like, for lack of a better term, like catchphrases or just like things like your brand, like the know what I mean, or like Suede God. And I'm like, I'm curious, like, what would you think like would be good advice for like newer artists who are trying to like establish themselves to like, how should they work to find their thing, like find their like thing that like a listener like me knows like will look for them for?
Yo, yeah, I mean, I think of it this way. Like Gucci had the Burr ad lib, you know, and Jeezy had his like, yeah. I think that everybody kind of got a, you know, OJ the Juice Man had the I. You know what I'm saying? And I think that just because we're doing like super word heavy stuff doesn't mean we got to stray away from that either. And I think that somebody that I might have learned that from a long time ago was Lil B, because I think for a while Lil B was just king of the ad libs with swag, chef.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that when I figured out, I knew at a certain point I was like, yo, I need the ad lib, I need the signature ad lib many years ago, and that kind of happened by accident because it's just I think you discover what you do the best when you throw shit at the wall. and stuff starts sticking, and like stuff starts finding its way into it like subconsciously. So one day I did a track. I don't remember which track it was specifically, but I did the Know What I Mean a couple different times, and I went back and heard it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's mine. So I just think, it just comes with finding your style. You think of all your influences, you lean on your influences, and then you keep working, and then you kind of have something that's all your own while
Hmm.
still like stepping on everybody else's shoulders. Like I'm on the shoulders of the people who influenced me, but my style is my style.
Yeah, Lil B, man, he was like so influential in so many ways, but the ad lib, like that changed the fucking game. Like, 'cause
Yeah, for
now, like
sure.
it's so common. Like you're right. It used to be a specific type of artist that had ad libs. The rest were like, oh, you're lyrical, you don't have ad libs. That's
Yeah.
stupid shit. But now everybody has them. Like no
You
matter
need it,
what, it's
bro.
just a
I guess you
thing.
don't need it, but it's important, yo. It's like your
Hmm.
stamp, Like there was one time, I sent a verse to Blood Blixen, and I didn't say "Know What I Mean" at the end. Like I had it in the ad lib somewhere, and he hit me up, and he was like, "Nah, yo, I need you. Can you send me a Know What I Mean?" I was like, "Yo, I got you."
I
I went
love
back and
that. I
recorded
fucking love
it.
Blood Mixing. That's awesome.
Word.
Uh, so like yeah. And speaking of beats here, so you're also not just a rapper. Like, you're a very talented beat maker as well. My background here, Avada Kedavra,
Yeah. That's some
like
of my
that.
best beats, I think personally.
I
So
agree. I fucking really loved how just like how clear and dusty. Like it was just a nice, yeah, a little bit of psychedelic vibes too. Like it was just a really good mix of things. Um,
appreciate it.
and I'm curious, like what part of hip hop do you think comes more naturally? Is it the rapping or is it the producing?
Uh, I think rapping, it's hard to work on both of them at the same time. You know, when I do tapes like Avada Kedavra, it's a time period of me making a lot of beats first until I have enough that I want to rap over. But I don't know if this all the way answers the question. I think it comes more naturally to rap, but that's why every once in a while I do partner up with other producers. That makes me a better rapper. When I rap on my own beats, I think of it more like songs because I know the beats hella well and I know the structures of the beats and I know when certain drums might drop, if there is drums or certain things might chop. So I treat it more like we're writing songs.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think because I don't have to split it up between rapping and making beats when I'm working with Televangel or if I'm working with Small Professor or whoever, I could give 100% of that to rap. And I think every time I do that, it makes the rapping on my next self-produced album stronger. Because I got to go to the gym for a couple albums. And then in the background, I'm slowly progressing with the beats and trying to get better with the beats. But it's just all a matter of how much time I'm putting into one over the other, you know?
Yeah, like I that's a really good point. And I think when I think of other common examples of artists that self-produce, because I made this comment not directly, but it's related. In my recent review of the Aethiopes, like a Woods Preservation album, and I was making
Mhm.
the comment that I feel like because Woods doesn't produce, from my knowledge, he has no
Yeah,
production credits. But I had noticed over the past like several years, there's something about his like songwriting, beat selection, like a lot of that has just improved. And I found it very impressive, some of the things I heard about the creation of Aethios because he doesn't actually produce. Because I feel, as you kind of said it just now, if you produce and rap, I feel like you just are a natural advantage, at least from a starting point, in terms of understanding like where a voice should be, like the pocket to be in, the little nuances. I feel like you're just, especially when it's your own beat, you just kind of like know exactly what it is. You're so
yeah.
intimately like
I
known.
think
So,
sometimes though, Woods has an advantage for not producing because like I don't understand how, as somebody who writes shit, the way that Woods sets up his flow. And I think because I make beats and I have an understanding of drums and notes, that I'm a little bit more rigid in my delivery. And I have a hard time, like, obviously, I'm not trying to do what Woods does, but the way Woods rhymes, I don't know if I personally could write like that because I have a producer mind. Like, I'm still like within the lines of certain eighth notes and 16th notes, whereas Woods can just go wherever the fuck he wants. You know what I
that's
mean?
very interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Because then other examples of artists that actually do produce their own work, and rap, but I always feel should do less of that, honestly, is like a J. Cole. That's like a common example, but I think
Oh yeah.
it's really did that a little bit finally on his last album. But I feel like I'm trying to think of what maybe be the reason. But for you, I feel like you have a style that's I just find so distinct that I find it's hard for you to sound boring on your own production because it's just like I don't know. I feel like your style is just like so interesting, and I feel like J. Cole, unfortunately, I do think he's a good rapper, but he can. I don't think there's something ultra distinct about anything he does. I just think he's fundamentally good, pretty good at
Yeah.
rapping. So I feel like he could benefit a lot from working with other producers because I do find a lot of his self-produced stuff. It just he's way too comfortable, basically.
Yeah, I can't. I don't even know what the last J. Cole yeah, I can't
It
tell
would have
you.
been KOD.
Oh, KOD.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gave that a spin. That's not my favorite. I was on like the whole train of like trying to like clown J. Cole until I seen him live. Like there was like a whole narrative where people was trying to front like, yo, kids don't like J. Cole. J. Cole puts
People
you to
love J.
sleep.
Cole.
J. Cole is boring and this, that, and the third. And that was all in that echo chamber that was just like kind of just trying to smear J. Cole shit. And being weak-minded, I agree with a piece of it. So I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, J. Cole's boring. But I go to see J. Cole live, and that changed my whole entire perspective of J. Cole. I got a lot of respect for him. And everybody in the crowd was going crazy.
Oh yeah.
He had the whole live band. I seen Thug and Lil Wayne and a couple other people before him that same day. He had no vocals on his shit. He shut the whole down. He shut his whole shit down. And from then I was just like, anytime I hear somebody, like whether I listen to them a lot or not, which really isn't the case, I always gotta anytime somebody clowns J. Cole, I kind of gotta be like, yo, hold up.
Yeah, people
You
go
know what I'm
way
saying?
too wild with that stuff. It's weird, to be honest.
Yeah.
I do get it to an extent, but it's just classic like echo chamber, like you said. People just want to overhype everything, either positive or negative.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I kind of got to wait for like with people of that stature, I kind of got to wait for hype to die down before I listen to certain things because I don't want to be like indirectly influenced. But like on larger projects, like obviously I'm gonna jump on the Kendrick album as soon as that shit drops,
Hmm.
but I might have to turn off Twitter until I'm done listening to the whole entire thing. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
yeah, those are the kind. Kendrick's like a perfect example. I feel like I got such a great first listen from Damn because I was like on a Greyhound and I
saying? Yeah,
downloaded it prior, like, and then listened to it the morning after, and I had no conception of what the album was. And I feel like that was the one where I still people loved it, but it was a little more mixed. I think people had ridiculous expectations, and I was like, man, I loved that album. What the fuck? That
yeah.
was great. I was like, fuck you guys. Like, I'm
It's
really
crazy
enjoying
because it's
this.
like even if you don't like that one, it still has the balance of having the singles like Humble and
Hmm.
DNA. Like it still has the two radio records of Humble and DNA, but everything else is kind of is heavy duty rapping. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
And so you recently linked up with two great producers, as we've already talked about, Small Professor and Televangel. So I want to start with Metatron's Cube that dropped earlier this year. So I think it's an incredible record. We actually already spoke about this and collaborated on that Three Keys piece, which I thought was fantastic. So go check that out on the Rap
Questions
Music
were great
Plug
too. Good
podcast
questions.
website if you haven't already. And there's a few things that I kind of want to expand on that you spoke about, as well as Televangel spoke about in the piece. So one of the things is that obviously I called out that I think you guys made a great pairing, and you had mentioned that you felt like you and Televangel were one of the few people who could bridge the gap between multiple generations and make something that was somewhat reminiscent of that classic cloud rap sound that was really popular in like the around the early 2010s. So why was making an album that drew from this era or spoke to this era important to you? And do you feel like Metatron's Cube does fit that movement, or is it something different from that?
Well, the thing with Metatron's Cube, we didn't really know what we had until it was done. So inadvertently, we ended up doing that. But I just remember Blue Sky Black Death during that era of Blue Sky Black Death and where I was at, and like a lot of the people that we know in common, like Main Attractions or Pepper Boy or just a whole bunch of people that go back to that era, Western Tint, Beautiful Lou, and prior to that, Blue Sky Black Death was doing a lot of hip hop stuff with Baby Grand and Hellraiser and Jean Grey and War Dove slash Holocaust from Wu Tang members and affiliates and stuff like that. So I think naturally the beats that I chose out of those packs, because I got at least 50 beats to choose from, and there was beats that I chose and rapped over that the versions that we have now, like Rubies and Wake the Wind and Master Shake, that those were songs that were recorded over different beats and got swapped out at the end. Like they almost didn't even make the album completely until I heard the new versions of the beats and I thought they would have fly. Those types of beats were just, really fucking crazy. And when we got the final project and the product of it, it kind of just sounded like that because I felt like it had some of the early skeletons of Blue Sky Black Death records, like with the drums and everything. And then the backdrops kind of had that atmospheric, quote unquote, cloud kind of sound, the ambient sound. And yeah, so I don't think it was really on purpose, but I think that and also a lot of the beats I rapped on, but just like prototype versions of the beats. When I started getting the final mixes and the masters and stuff back, there was stuff added after I left Portland. Like he went back and there might be, so a lot of it was familiar but new to me as well. So when I heard the final product in its entirety, front to back, I was like, oh shit. Like, we knew the shit was fire. Like we went there trying to make the most fire product that we could possibly make. But what we had at the end, I don't even think we really expected that. And then we were able to kind of put together like, damn, this is like now and then.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It is like now and then. And
tomorrow.
Yeah, and tomorrow. Because like straight up, nothing sounds like it because I found it really interesting in the piece because Televangel got really in depth about the specifics and some of the ways he wanted to marry that cloud rap-esque style with like a more grimy hip hop sound, which is something that he hasn't actually done recently, which I found was really cool because it has a rugged feel. Like it feels like it doesn't feel super immediately pretty and like clean like a lot of that Blue Sky Black Death stuff sounded and other artists in that vein. So he really did something special for you.
Yeah, but even because prior to that, I don't feel like he was really making too much music for people who rap like me. Like Nacho has a very distinct style.
Yeah.
And that requires like distinct types of beats. And then the stuff he was doing with Squatta and Pepper Boy and all of them, and like even joints he's done for Black Cray, if you're familiar with who that is. Like they're different. I think I was the first one to come around like as of recent that was able to rhyme on shit like that. So I kind of, if I could take the credit humbly, Ian, gave you that little extra push to, get back to this style of beats. Cause at first, like I was also thinking of mixing it up and like maybe having one or two joints that the closest thing might be Elysium. That's something that like I could hear potentially on one of those like older Nacho albums as far as like the tempo is concerned and shit. But I think we was able to like hit all the bases of like all the periods of time that we've seen. It's just because then you'll have a song like Here with Squatta, and that's definitely a product of that era, like updated of course. But then you have shit like Terror or Respect the Architect that kind of has like older Blue Sky Black Death like drums and skeletons, but modern futuristic backdrop.
Yeah, and so you're speaking of some of those features you got some crazy ones. You got a crazy feature. That's one of my favorite Esquire features he's done in a long time, and he doesn't really do that many, so like that's pretty unique on its own, but he like slayed that shit.
Nah, yeah, it was crazy the first time I heard it.
And then Prem, and yours and Prem's chemistry, Joel Osteen, is that how you say his name?
Yeah, I think so.
Joel Osteen on.
I told Prem like 2 years ago when me and Televangel were first talking about doing this tape, like, and we already did Joel Osteen, but that had to wait a little while because there was a couple other releases on the label that had to go first. So that actually dropped a little while after it was recorded. But I was hitting him up and I'll be like, yo, me and Televangel are working on this album, yo, I gotta get you on it. They're like, word. Then a year passed and I'll be like, pandemic's happening and all that shit. And I'm like, yo, we still working on it little by little. I'm gonna have something for you soon. And then finally in November, I had that verse in, so it just worked out perfectly.
And the rest is history. That's my
Yeah.
favorite Prem feature, period. That's saying a lot. He's a great
Crazy.
artist.
He did
That's
crazy too, because
insane.
it has the sleigh bells. And I'm always joking about how you can't really do the sleigh bells without it sounding like Christmas or sounding like some 80s shit, like some Run DMC. But that was like some of the most fly sleigh bell in place of hi-hats on a beat in the longest.
It could be the best. I'm trying to think. There's like, it's not common. So, but that beat is like phenomenal.
Word.
Definitely one of the standouts on the album, period.
I told him too when I heard it. My bad for cutting you off. I was like, yo, this reminds me of like the first time I heard 8 Steps to Perfection by Company Flow. So that's why, like in the song, I'm like 12 steps to perfection. You're halfway there.
Nice. Nice.
It made me think of 8 Steps to Perfection the first time I ever heard that song. So
yeah, like you and Prem feel, when I think about it more, really like have a similar quality to it, that you're both kind of hard. You have this like quiet confidence, but like a calm too.
yeah,
like obviously great lyricists. I think that's like, I would love to see more work
you know
from
what
you
I
guys
think
in
it
the
is
future.
though. I think the common ground there is like, he spoke about it before, so it's no big deal. But he's a bartender, and I cook part time, and I think that like still interacting with everybody and just being a member of society for however many hours a week that you have to do gives you this balance and gives you like keeps you grounded in one way, because it's like I could go and play a show and have the shit wall to wall and then still have to clock in the next day like it's nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and I think I'm sure he deals with that same exact thing too. It's just like, you're the shit, but you're not here. We're here to do a job. Like you're not really, and I kind of take that with me everywhere. Like I don't come here to talk about like, oh yeah, outside of here, I'm doing this, that, and the third. But for these, I don't know, just good interactions with people, and you just stay really grounded and you just do your part. But
it's a personability thing.
We're all retiring early though. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. When I met Prem, I was lucky to meet him twice in like the same week in Ottawa where I live. And then when I saw Arm & Hammer and then Prem and Kills, I got that same feeling. He's an everyman kind of dude. You can talk to him for hours and you can tell he's a bartender because he's just great conversation. And I want to talk quickly about the title of Metatron's Cube. This is something I did ask you about in the piece. And I want to just get a bit deeper into this cube worship thing, because it's funny you said you had a unit on in like elementary school. I straight up don't even really understand what it is. So
cubism is like a style of painting that Picasso did to do the 2D and 3D at the same time. So yeah, we had a unit on that specifically. But the cube shit,
those aren't the same. Are those not the same thing, right? Like, are they related?
But it's just funny how often cubes find their way it's in everything. How much time you got?
I mean, you have, because like when I was doing some like really deep diving in some of your music recently, I didn't notice at first how much it came up in your music. Like you have what's a project called Black Cube, right?
Yeah. So the person who's on that project, my homie Baby Son, we don't really collaborate too much at the moment, but he was one of the first people that came to me and was kind of like me and some of my friends, especially in Seattle, in this crew called UDF, which is like, it's where a lot of the occult influence comes from. It's like psychedelic hardcore, like, type shit, but we had those type of talks, and he was the first one who was talking about like, yo, cube worship and Saturn, and and then it makes you think back into like all the movies and all the advertisements, and every time you just see random cubes, like you got the Allspark and Transformers, you got the Tesseract in the Marvel universe, and just a whole bunch of things, like as to where there are cubes in places where it's like, wow, the fuck is that? These don't occur naturally in nature. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it is a giant black cube in Astor Place in Manhattan. It's just Saturn worship in like hot places. And I think obviously, I'm not worshiping anything like that, but it's just a fun thing. I think it's a fun running thing that me, Baby Son, and our other friend Christ Cooper had going for a while. And that kind of just started becoming like one of those themes that I think that you were just able to associate with it. So I kind of just keep it going because I think it's funny, and I think that we were some of the first people, and I'm gonna give them their credit because they originally put me on, and then I did the due diligence myself to like really just be using that shit in the theme of the music, but not just like going pure tinfoil hat. It's just like it's mixing the food with the medicine.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. And it just kind of has a nice steez to it, It doesn't need to be,
where
it's not necessarily even about the thing. Um, and something I like about contrasting Metatron's Cube to 100 Year Darkness is that it feels almost like the record with Televangel was like what you're talking about, and kind of even to an extent the music itself, like the instrumentals, it felt really like big and like a big broad scope. Whereas 100 Year
yeah,
Darkness, as you kind of described it, it feels a lot more like in the moment. Like it feels like, yeah, you're a jazz musician, you're like playing off of the beats, but specifically with the production here, the main thing I took away from it, irrespective of that contrast with Metatron's Cube, is that it was it's very serene. It's very like a calming, subtle kind of album. It's not trying to like punch you in the face, but it is still hard hitting, but not from a musical perspective. Did you guys, what was your kind of approach to the sound? Like, did you tell him like, hey, I want to make like beats that are like a little more quieter, or like, I don't know.
he sent me a bunch of packs, and there was definitely beats that weren't like that in there. There were like joints that were heavier, like the drums were a lot higher,
Right.
and I just gravitated towards those. And I think it was mostly because, like, not saying I didn't like those other beats, but I like the way that the beats that got selected work with each other to create that mood. So there was definitely stuff that was a lot different from that. But I went that way with it, and I feel like even the more minimal or like sparse joints, I felt like I was just another instrument that was added to his production, you know.
Mm-hmm. And it does feel like you're playing off the beat, because I think this one gave you more space and kind of, in my opinion, like asked you to do more in a way to like have a interesting flow, do something that'll catch your eye, catch the ear of the
Yeah.
listener. And
Especially keep changing it up every couple bars to not like
mhm.
lose the listener, you know.
And I think on this record specifically, these last two really, I think your rapping is like incredibly concise. And like some of the quote, especially on 100 Year Darkness, some of the quotables were just like every song I was catching a couple where I'm like, damn, that is
You was picking
fucking
them up
sick.
though, because the thing
There
is
was
like a
like
lot of
all like
songs
one
they
day where I was just catching
yeah,
everything. I was like, damn, this album's sick.
like the Creed one might go over a couple heads, because it's like I remember specifically I went to karaoke with my family a long time ago. I might have been like 13, and some fool did Arms Wide Open by Creed.
I
So that's
it's
like the direct like memory that I have where that
yeah.
bar like formulated itself.
Yeah, no,
But
I
then like
love
the
I
poem
love that
Creed
fucking
as
line.
well. So it's like the double entendre kind of
Yeah.
situation.
And like even like I don't know if this is on 100 Year Darkness. It might be on Metatron's Cube, but you have like, why I'm here, like Marshawn. Is that which
That's my
album is it?
Metatron Q.
That's on
Yeah.
Metatron's Cube. Yeah, yeah. It's even like bars like that where there's not really. I'm trying. Maybe I'm wrong. I need to remember the context of that line. But there's a lot of, you have those lines where it's like it doesn't even need to be so like you're talking about cubism or cube worship or whatever. It's just like good references. Like I like that shit. Like it's just
Yeah.
funny or clever and shit like that. I just think you've been just really on like a great, like you've been really on point recently. And I'm curious, like, do you think like at this point you're rapping the best you've ever been rapping?
Nah, because I want to get better. But like, yeah, I do feel like at this moment, this is like a culmination. And the thing with 100 Years of Darkness that I heard somebody else describe, just like being omnipotent, paying attention to the conversation, is that there's a lot of different flows as the songs go. And I think those are all flows that I've learned over time by having so many different catalogs. Like I got like names for certain flows. Like I might hear a track and be like, oh, I'm gonna use the blank flow. I'm gonna use like they all references to other songs. Like the first time
Mm-hmm.
I might have used that flow
Right.
on that particular song. But there was also times where the beat allowed me to do like I could do 8 bars of the blank flow and then do another 4 bars of this flow and then you know what I'm saying? And but like I think a good example of that is the track Major Event. And that one
Yeah.
has like a swing where I'm doing the hook. I was like, shit, I can't really count if this is a 4 bar loop because small is good with time signatures. You know, like there's certain tracks that are like 6-bar loops. It's not all the traditional 4 count.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was writing that one and I was doing the hook, I was like having a hard time telling if the hook was a bar short or a bar too much. So when I did the second every year as a major event, I can't tell if it's early or late, but the way that it swings, and I'm like, every year we lose a great or a vet. That's just me doing the same exact thing that the beat is doing. Because I
Mm.
knew that when it came back around, I don't know, it was like having like a block of cement and kind of chiseling out the flows, you know, in every single
Yeah.
track because it was there, but I just had to unlock it.
And that's cool because you were saying how like it's kind of going to the gym. It's like getting your reps in when you're working with another producer.
Yeah,
Working with those kind of time signatures and that kind of erect like opposite of automated um perfectly precise things like that. I'm thinking of the greatest producers like Jay Dilla. Like that was like something I know he always was like against like quantizing his drums because he
yeah,
liked that natural swing because it just brought something out of the music. And I'm sure that helps you as a rapper too, to kind of
yeah.
like inspire you to push yourself and do things a little differently.
Not for sure. That's why like sometimes like it's fun to work with producers like these, especially because there's certain things like I got my own lane in production that I formulated and I still have fun and I still try new shit, but there's certain producers that are known for doing certain things. And I feel like I'm known for doing a certain thing. So when I go to their world, I get to pick up more pieces. And like I said with Televangel, there's a lot. It's beats are dense. There's layers.
Yeah.
There's shit going on in different ears. There's like and so with that, like it unlocks a certain style of rapping, But I think the song 5 times 10 was one of the later songs recorded. That might have been like the last song, but I unlocked something there when
That's
it comes to
my
flow.
probably my favorite song by you.
Thank
Straight
you.
up.
That's one of my favorites too, because that's why like when it got the first video, and I was struggling to figure out which song is going to get the first video around that time, and to me that was it. But when I first did that flow, that one kind of got lost. He sent me back the mixes, and then he was like, "Yo, there was a whole other track that we recorded that I forgot about," and sent it to me. And I was like, "Oh shit, how the fuck did I forget about this?" And he's like, "Yo, I know, right?" And then so that was my first time. I was listening to all the mixes and masters, and then I got that brand new right over
Mm,
it, and I was just like, "Yeah, I kind of unlocked a little something with this flow, at least in the beginning 4 bars of the verse, with the bullshit. It's all math, yo. It's all math and like swing and like where you decide to start the verse. Are you gonna start it on the one? Are you gonna start it like an eighth note before? But it all got to equal up to 16 in a way.
yeah.
You know what
Man,
I'm
the
saying?
flow that you have there and like the way it transitions to the hook is like that was like truly I was like wow. Like
Oh, yo, thank you.
I'm fucking like impressed. And yeah, like it just and that one was also it's also feels a little different from the rest of the album. It still fits, but it's like a nice closer. It feels like a send
Yeah,
off, you know? Like it's
it's
like a
like off on a
stamp.
high note for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I feel like it's not as moody as some of the tracks, like, and not even moody like a bad thing. Like, some of them like that atmosphere that's kind of being created to me feels hella Northwest. Like
Yeah.
we did that one in Portland, and Honey Year Darkness was, even though small from Philly, I made that at home in Seattle, and I feel like there's two different types of atmospheres, but one might be that one's a little bit more Portland, I might say, because it's like dark like Seattle,
Hmm.
but it's not as dark. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
not as
Yeah.
rainy. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't get as rainy. Whereas like 100 Years of Darkness is like more Seattle.
Hmm. And there is like rain sound effects. I think it's parts in that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yo,
Yeah.
I did on the track Enterprise. It seems like there was some rain behind it,
Hmm.
which is that was perfect to me.
Yeah. So like who are some other producers that you'd love to link up with and do another collaborative project with if you had to choose?
Shit, yo, there's shit that's already like kind of in the works. I mean, I guess I could say that me and Steel Tip Dub are working on some shit. You
Okay.
know, we might be
Hey.
working on something else too, but there's another rapper a part of that, and I don't want to speak about that till that's done. But yeah, I might when I go to New York next month, I'm gonna go kick it with him in the studio for a little bit. But like I already got joints, so I'm like writing here and there. So when I show
Hmm.
up, I could knock out as much as possible. But shit, yeah, I wanna do a joint with Muggs. All this is
Oh
all
yeah.
wish list shit, Muggs, Madlib. But if we want to be realistic, like people coming up, like I listen to tons I'm a fan of all the good music. You know, like I always love finding new music. I love giving people their props. I like reaching out just to be like, yo, your shit is fire, and then just like disappearing. You know, like not even.
Yeah.
But shit, there's a couple people up and coming or like within our world that I hear all the time, and I feel like the only reason I don't want to mention names is because I might leave some out. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, Muggs, Nick Craven, uh, shit. There's a lot of really good people. You know, it's a good time to be a fan of this shit, and
Oh,
it's a
it's
good
such a
time to
good
keep
time.
discovering stuff too. You know.
Yeah. And so I think it's a good transition. Like generally stuff you can speak on, of course. What are some upcoming projects? I know you got the vinyl for Metatron's Cube that's coming up, which is dope. That's on May
Yeah.
27th. But yeah, what else do you got? Can people expect in the next like year or so?
Oh yeah, we're gonna get Metatron's Cube 2 this year for
Oh
sure.
shit.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
That's
And
actually
it's like,
didn't expect that at all. Holy shit.
nah, I'm gonna go down there potentially. Televangel just had a kid, so
Oh,
like I
that's
wanted to
awesome.
make sure he had a couple months to like be a dad and like make his imprint, and I don't want to interrupt him and his wife's like parenting time and shit. But I might go down there in July and get started, you know. But Metatron's Cube vinyl's coming. Somebody might do Avada Kedavra. There's a local there's a local record company ran by one guy in Seattle called Crane City Records, and he put on my last vinyl. And we've been talking back and forth about, originally he wanted to do Dark Suede 6, but we're kind of worried that shit is in the Disney system and there's Vader on the cover and there's Darth in it. And I
Hmm.
don't want to get cease and desisted like down the
Yeah.
line. Like if that one goes on to travel, that particular vinyl travels the world and ends up in a Disney exec's hand. So we might do about a Cadabra. We're talking about it, but I just gotta make sure like we're all on the same page. And then shit, Metatron's Cube 2, me and Doug working on something, and then there's another project that I'm slow cooking with another rapper that until we have over 8 projects, I'm keeping 8 songs completed. I'm keeping my mouth shut on it, you
Yeah.
know?
Fair enough. Those are dope, man. I actually really thought you've been releasing so much music. I didn't expect a Metatron's Cube. That's the last I thought maybe you were gonna get like a solo or something. Damn, that's impressive.
Yeah, yo,
That's
I have one in the cut. Like I have 7 tracks done, but it's crazy because it's like I'm trying to slow down the output. It still seems like a lot, but I'm thinking of like dropping one every quarter
that's a
as
good
opposed to like
amount.
how I would just drop like until like just because I make music. That's how I have the most fun. That's how I stay occupied. How I stay out of trouble and shit. And still gonna just do 4. And it's crazy because there's tons of people who reach out to me about like, you know, do this, that, and the third. And it's hard for me to like really break down. Like I'm not doing 6 to 8 projects a year anymore. That's just not happening.
Yeah,
You know
I
what I'm
mean
saying?
it depends. I feel like there's no like one size fits all. I think there's
Yeah,
a
I mean, different
time
people,
when
different people, different shit. But
like
I need
because
to live as much as I'm writing. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, it depends on how you create, and it depends, I think,
Mhm.
where you are in your career. Because I'm thinking of an artist like we talked about, Iceberg Theory, that like 2020, like complete, like I don't know what you even call it. He released like 7 projects, and
On
they
a
were all
run. Yeah.
huge. Like he just flooded the market, and I feel
Mhm.
like that was really a good strategy for him because I think his style and his music is not very easy to like necessarily penetrate and really get with, but I just kept getting like so many projects coming out. There was so much for me to go back to. I was able
Yeah.
to very quickly get to that. Okay, no, this guy's dope. But if I heard one project and I had to wait 6 months, I might have just been like, okay, that was a little strange. I don't know if I get
Yeah.
that, and I may forget it. But I had like 7 other August Fanon produced projects to like hit up. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna listen, like, and
Yeah.
now I'm like huge fan. So it all depends for sure.
Yeah, I just know like I'll get tapped out if I'm not like doing enough to, because you know I went on runs where I've done that, but one thing I've learned is like you got to give a little bit. Me personally, you got to give a little bit more attention to the rollout and how you roll that out. And some of the time that I might have been spent making music, I should spend that working on the rollout or plotting another video or two, as opposed to just. So that's like it's not like I'm working, not working, but I want to just try to nurture some of these projects. And I think when I dropped Metatron's Cube, I learned that because we really were patient with it and waited for the verses to get in, waited to we gave it to Fake Four, and because we just took our time. And like for me, I had to learn how to better occupy my time in that, because I would frantically just be working on more music. Not frantically, but I would just be working on more music because that's what I do. But from that period of that album being done to it being turned in to it being released, I want to live life. You know what I'm saying? Worked on the rollout, thought of some ideas, try to figure out how to get it to certain people. But I wouldn't have done that before if after the last drop, I just started working on the next drop again. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think, and like from a listener's perspective too, there's so much music that comes out. I feel like a quarter is a good amount, because if you start to get, again, it depends, but if you start to get more frequent, it's like, man, like I'm barely digested your last record. There's like a million other great artists making music. It's like, that's where that has happened with some artists where I'm like, I'm a fan, but it takes me a few months to get to their stuff because it's just been so much. And I'm like, I can't only listen to you,
People start feeling like when you have like a really high frequency, like same thing if you play like too many shows in like the same location. Every once in a while, somebody could be like, there's going to be another one in 2 weeks. I can miss this one.
Yeah.
You kind of I personally want to kind of avoid that. Like, I want to just space it out just enough that like you might have just finished digesting it and now you have a little bit more time to come in, bump the next one, So I'm trying. Everything is learning experience and kind of like experimenting in real time, because every single album or project that I released did different things, and I get to learn from the album covers to the amount of songs I chose to how I sequenced it. I study all of that just to see how that affects the reaction that the people have. And I keep just trying to improve that in the process of thinking. Like, I'm not ever gonna, there's times I might have been a little bit lackadaisical about, cover arts or deadlines. I'm not doing that shit anymore. I'm gonna make sure that every single thing I do is to the best that I could possibly do it. Not saying that I was before, but you gotta keep raising the bar on yourself, production value and learning more about mixing, learning more about mastering, just constantly being a student. You know what I'm saying?
And on that note, I think it's a great time to wrap here. I just have to say, like, I was a fan last year for sure. I loved your music, but I think this year you've just leveled the fuck up. And you're talking about like, it is the other aspects too, like Metatron's Cube. I don't know when you first even teased the track list, but I remember knowing about the record coming for at least 2 months, maybe. And I think it was all public stuff. Like, you didn't tell me in advance. So I was like primed to listen to that, especially like Televangel. Like, I was super intrigued, obviously, but I just think you've really been stepping up your game, and the way you're talking about now, I'm excited for like everything you have upcoming.
Thank you, yo. You too, man. You've been doing your thing out here, interviewing a lot of good people. So I'm glad to be a part of that too. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. And take care. Have a good rest of the night.
Peace.
So there we have it. Another episode of the Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV. I hope this episode gave you some new perspectives and insights into what the greatest art form known to man in hip-hop music has to offer. If you want to support the show in the most meaningful way possible, it would be my absolute honor to have you as a patron in the new Rap Music Plug podcast Patreon. Through this Patreon, you will be getting exclusive content such as bonus episodes, exclusive album recommendations, exclusive playlists, early access to episodes, and more. And above all, though, you will be able to support the show directly in a way that will not only justify the crazy amount of time I spend on this show already, but allow me to cover some of the expenses related to supporting all of these great artists that we cover on the show through the website, and will allow us to sustain and build on this amazing growth that the RMPP has experienced recently. Big shout out to Dano of Free Music Empire, Levi, Mahima, Jeff, Mitch, Dash Lewis, Pancake Cleaner, Trey, Noah, Justin, Brandon, Joe, Gavin, Matt, Teddy Faley, Jackson, CN, Slumber Logic, Fatman Tomb, and Khalid for your generous support through the Patreon. I really appreciate it. So if you have any questions about any of the Patreon stuff, or just want to keep tabs on the show, interact with me on rap music and all the great stuff that we can talk about, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at rapmusicplugpod, or shoot me an email at qlctv.podcast@gmail.com. You can also rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify as well. But that's enough self-promotion for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.